Alright, so I got a new phone today, and it doesn't have the same microphone jack as my old phone, so hopefully the built-in microphone is going to do the trick. I was requested to do a video that shows nothing but percussion to reduce a nodule down to a biface. Nothing but direct percussion, I should say. All right, so the request is simple enough. I've done it many times, but I think the issue is I've actually done so many videos that it's hard to go through and look at previous videos and try to figure out which ones have nodule reduction only with percussion, direct percussion. So I'll just do one dedicated to that. Although you might be able to do a search for Jack Crafty percussion only or direct percussion only. I'm not sure if I have one titled in that way. But after this one, I definitely will. Now this one broke right there. There may have been an internal issue right here, but yeah, I could have probably preserved more of that length if I was more careful. But some of this raw stuff is easy to snap in half no matter what you do. I've snapped them in half lengthwise even. All right. So this is a little bit more manageable anyway. A little bit more manageable. So I'm going to start out by explaining exactly why I hit in certain places. Now there are issues with trying to explain what my brain has been trained to do without thinking. All right, that's the first major obstacle. It's going to be hard to articulate why I do something when I've spent many years attempting to eliminate the process of thinking while doing. There's a whole different process of communication between me and the stone, let's say, than trying to go from me to an explanation and then back to me and then hit the stone. Or something to that effect. Blank out for a minute, hit the stone, and then try to come back and explain what I just did. Okay, so just bear that in mind, keep that in mind. If what I do doesn't match to what I say, go by what I do. Okay. So the first thing I do on these things is I thin down the ends. Thin down the ends. Why? Because it prevents stuff like this. Not always. You know, I was attempting to thin down this end. In that process, I broke it in half. Okay, I'm going to start it again by thinning down the ends, going for the thickest spot first on the ends. There are no platforms, so to speak, on this. I'm going to have to look and see if something resembles a platform and strike it in a way that resembles a proper strike. I'm going to strike what resembles a proper platform in a way that resembles a proper strike. Neither one will be proper. It will not be a proper platform and it will not be a proper strike. How do I define proper? Proper means putting together all my experience and do it in a way that maximizes my experience and maximizes the success. That's the proper way. I don't always nap that way. In fact, I think maybe half the time at best, I nap that way. Usually, I make do with what I've got. Or, as I like to say, make doo-doo with what I got, because it's not going to be the proper way. Okay, so this looks like it might be, or it might resemble a proper platform here, and I'm going to hit it in a way that's kind of like a proper way of hitting it, all right? But it's not going to be exact because this is very low. I'm going to try not to send it too far in because all I want is a secondary platform to strike this way to get rid of this. And then we'll see what happens after that. Sometimes I can plan one step in advance, maybe 2 steps in advance, rarely further than that. Okay. So I've just swiped it. I cleaned off and flattened this end before I struck. And you can see the scratch from this strike. Hit in the middle and scratched it toward the end. So I hit in the middle, scratch it toward the end. So now I have a platform here, or what resembles a proper platform, and hit it this way. Why is it not proper? Because my experience says if I hit it now, since this is delicate, it will have a chance of crumbling. But I don't care. I'm just going to go ahead and hit it. Why don't I care? Because this is in the beginning preliminary stages. I can do a lot of things in the beginning preliminary stage that are not proper, just for expediency and just so I can start thinning this down. Now see, that didn't crush, but it didn't travel very far. Do I care? No. Why did I strike it like that when I knew there was a possibility of it not doing that, not going in the right way? Expediency. You'll notice a lot of the why is going to be because of expediency. I'm going to try to explain every strike. Now this strike is going to be on a better prepared area because I ground it down. I hit back the delicate area so I can strike in this direction to remove this mass here. So I'm going, it's zigzagging. Let's see if I can get this to focus. The new camera is a little bit different. The new phone's a little bit different. All right. So I'm going to hit this in a way that's not exactly proper because I'm going to try to hit this without hitting that. Normally, or not normally, the proper way is to take this back more. Okay? But I'm not going to. For expediency's sake, I'm going to try to hit that with a strike like this instead of a strike like this, because this strike has a possibility of hitting there more than if I struck like this. And it's just because of the feel of it. There's more of a distance to travel in this direction than if I were to do this. Okay. There's more of a distance there. So I'm going to back off a little bit like this and hit it this way. This is not a proper hit according to my experience, but I don't care because I'm trying to be expedient. So I hit in a spot that was advantageous. It looks like I hit here just by looking at the metal deposit. I don't know, is that zooming in properly? See the deposit of metal right there? I'm probably going to have to adjust the camera settings so it'll zoom in when I touch the lens or when I touch the viewfinder. Okay. I'm brushing it back. This is not the proper way of brushing. In my experience, the proper way is to brush it with an abrader. But for expediency's sake, I'm going to brush it many times with this. Now, why do I go over brushing and abrading? That's part of the reason why I hit certain areas or why I don't hit certain areas. If I'm using an improper brushing or abrading technique, I'm going to have to look opportunistically on what appears to be a good striking area. It may or may not be. And I'll weigh the risks. This is not ideal because it's not completely convex in an area below the platform. It's slightly convex here, but then it becomes concave. Ideally, the proper way to do it is with a complete concavity. Okay, but I'm going to hit it anyway because I need to get rid of this mass. Eventually, zigzagging it will get rid of the mass. Okay, so I did strike it in the spot where I wanted. Even though it wasn't a perfect, so-called perfect platform, it did manage to carry the flake through that area. And I did succeed in removing a lot of that mass. Okay? I hit there improperly because I did not abrade it first. I hit that also improperly because I did not abrade it first. And I did not brush it first. But I don't care at this stage. It's a small flake removal. You can use almost any method to remove small flakes, proper or improper. Okay? Now I'm just reducing some of this mass because, you know, this was hanging out too far. I'm still looking at this here, but I don't have any angle of attack that's good. So I'm going to start picking at the edges where I do see opportunities for quote unquote good flakes, but they're not going to be proper flakes. They're going to be expedient flakes. Okay, at this stage it's expedience. Now this may take a long time to explain every strike, but now that I have a new camera with new microphone and new everything, maybe this will record for more than an hour. Hopefully I can record all the way through tonight without pausing and explain everything, even if it takes 3 hours to do this one nodule, only with percussion and explaining why I'm hitting every time I hit. Okay, I'm going to hit here because this appears to be a good area to strike, but it's going to be an improper area, and I'm going to hit it in such a way that I'm going to have to try to avoid other contours and hit this area, which is not proper. I should eliminate all contours that could interfere so that my swing is a no-brainer, but it's going to be more of a brainer, so to speak. Okay? Now, twice I hit it, nothing happened, okay, because it was an improper strike. This is a cortex in addition to other things that are not conducive to the flake. There is a cortex. What are the other things that are not conducive? It's not a strong angle for the removal of the flake. It's a weak angle. It's pretty steep. Another weak angle would be too pointed. Both of those are weak. The strongest is somewhere in between. Now I'm going to hit, instead of there, which I knocked off that spot, so now it's lower and not as protruding. So I'm going to go up higher and hit there. Again, it's not a proper place to hit. Why do I hit it? Because there's a possibility of removing the flake. And in this case, it did remove it. Did it remove it exactly where I wanted it to? No, because I wasn't thinking about exactly where the flake would end up. I just wanted to remove some of that mass. Same here. I don't really care where the flake goes. I'm just going to remove some of this mass. Okay. I'm going to speed it up. I think you get the gist of where I'm going with this. If you're brand new, you won't know what experience I have in flaking these things. You'll just have to watch and try to figure out for yourself if you're going to adopt the method that I use or not. If you can't figure out why I do a certain thing in my method, then don't adopt my method. If you want to adopt my method, the best thing to do is just keep watching it. If you cannot learn by watching, then just go ahead and do it on your own without watching. Watching may be messing you up. I know that watching sometimes would mess me up when I started. Now this is a raw piece. It's not heat treated. It is an amoeba looking piece of chert, but I think that they would call this tabular because it is relatively flat, and it is a higher grade than the gravel cherts that I've been napping on some of these videos. So this is, I consider this a high grade with a tendency to snap in the middle, which makes it kind of a medium grade because of what you can do with it. The extremely high grades, you can make very long blades without having to worry about this weakness in the strength of the stone, even though it's raw. The weakness being it's easily snappable. Again, all these strikes and all these areas that I strike are improper, or they go against many of the years of practice. Why do I do it that way? Everybody, expediency. Okay? If you don't understand expediency, well, first look up the definition, and second, try it yourself. I think you'll find, or maybe analyze your own napping, maybe you'll find that you are doing too much expediency, or you think you want to incorporate it into the process, but you really don't have enough experience to know exactly what you can get away with. I know that I can deviate from the norm and get away with certain things. Right? I know I could at least get a little bit off of there, even though I hit a really bad area as far as potential for flake removal. But I did it anyway, and I did remove a little bit. Now I'm looking to see, I got the ends kind of thinned down. This is a problem here. But there's no good way of attacking it that I can see anywhere near it. Now some of you may say, well, you can create a platform and take it down. Yeah, I could, but I'd rather go around and see if I can walk in on it. Walk in on this area while I'm doing other flakes. So I can walk in on this area by zigzagging here, probably. And we'll see how it goes. This is not a proper strike because I'm striking into an area that has a potential crack. This is an expedient strike. Yeah, that does have a crack in it. I can see some of it has opened up further. Yep. So what I saw happen was that it did remove a little bit of just a tiny bit on here. More of what I expected here. But it weakened this whole area a little bit. Now I can see the only place I can really go, I can continue zigzagging, or I can potentially go here from this side in here. I could have done that from the beginning, but with my options narrowing, this becomes more attractive now. I had more options earlier, just a little while ago. If this was stronger here, or if this had less of a dip, I may have continued and I may have struck, this way and then this way, instead of having to move up to this place and go this way. Now it's kind of late, so I'm not going to be as coherent as I normally am, or joking around or anything, as incoherent. On the other hand, it may not be as incoherent as I normally am. Whichever way, I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. All right. So that was a hard hit. So the combination of potential area to hit, the potential manipulating of the angles on the billet, and the strength and velocity of the hit are three major components. All right, and the reason I hit it is because I wanted to get rid of that mass. One of the main reasons. The other reason is just because it was a expedient area. There may have been another area. I didn't really explore it that well as far as the possibilities in other areas. I just made a quick assessment and went with the quick assessment. Now I'm going to be hitting this area and try to drive a flake in here and zigzag this area. Now I can work in the middle because my ends are thin. It makes it a little safer in terms of breaking in half, less likely to break in half. All these strikes so far have been swiping strikes. So you can kind of see all the scratches that are swipes. There'll be pitting and then swipes, pitting and then swipes. So that's how I'm hitting it, swiping it, or a glancing blow. Okay, this is going to be another glancing blow. It's not a proper area to hit because it's not protruding very much, just a little bit. So I'm going to have to be very careful not to hit that side or this side. Not to hit this side, not to hit that side. In a perfect world, that would be more protruding. In a perfect world, it would be completely convex with no defect. This has a defect. This has a defect. In a perfect world, this would be more convex with no defects. The defect is the step fracture. There is a step fracture there, not only because there's a step fracture within the solid material, but there's a step fracture within the cortex. The cortex has broken off there. And yes, the cortex matters when planning flakes. They can affect how the flake travels. So I hit there by mistake. Does it matter to me? Not at this stage. As it progresses, mistakes like that cannot be made, so I would have to make the platform protrude more so I won't make that mistake. But I'm going to try it again since it's exposed now more than it was before. Now I hit it right where I wanted to. It crushed. The reason why it crushed is probably because it was just too weak and not convex. Do I care? Not really. I've done this many times. At this stage, it doesn't really matter. This is another improper hit. It's not a really good platform, but it will remove some material, and I just want to see what happens. All right. So it did remove what I wanted to remove earlier, but it also removed stuff that wasn't really in the original plan. Originally, I wanted to remove material more on this side. But since the platform wasn't very good and I crushed it, I moved over a little bit and removed some on the other side for a less than perfect flake in the perfect world. Okay. This one was more of a easy, low-hanging fruit type of thing where I knew I could skin off that flake. And it pretty much went where I thought it would go. And I have an option to hit here or an option to hit there, but this one looks like a better option just because there's less material to remove. It's an easy, when it's less material to be removed, it's an easier option. A lot of times I go with the easier option in the early stages. Now I hit there by mistake. I was swiping this way, hit there by mistake. There's now an incipient crack, but I don't care. I'm going to have to lose this portion anyway that would probably contain that crack. Next time I'm going to aim a little bit further this way try to anyway. See what happens. Yeah. Now I missed a couple times. That's because I don't want to hit it high up. Why not high up? Because if I do, I'll remove more than this. And I didn't want to remove more than that. Just a little bit. I actually removed more than I thought I would remove. Okay. But it's all right. At this stage, doesn't matter too much. Am I abrading just right? Perfectly? Nope. Just barely enough to get by. And hitting just barely enough to create a flake. Now I was going to try to hit there, which I think I did a little bit, but most of the flake came off of there because somehow this hit this way. But it is now more protruding, so I'm going to try to strike it again. Even though there's a possibility for incipient cracks in that area, I'm going to hit it again. Because I need to get rid of the mass. There's not many options available. I could hit there, but this seems to be a better area, at least for now. I could sit here and, yeah, maybe that is a better area. I could convince myself that that's a better area. I could develop a better platform or a better striking area there instead of here if I sat here and thought about it. Or I could just go, let's do something else. Let's try to skin the rest of this off from a different area. Let's just change gears and look at something else. But for now, I'm going to go here. May not be a good idea, but that's what I'm choosing to do. Why? Expediency. When I'm by myself and I'm napping and I want to do it quickly, I don't concern myself too much with what is proper and what isn't. All I'm looking for is the general shape. Later on, as I do damage control, I have basically the same approach, but it's going to be a little bit more careful when I'm doing damage control, like removing a problem area. Right now, the only problem areas are just thick spots around the edges and lumps and stuff that interfere with the preliminary shape of the preliminary platform. I mean, a preliminary biface. Preliminary shape of the preliminary biface. When I get to the stage that I think it's no longer preliminary, I'll let you know. I'll go, okay, next stage. So I didn't think it would take off that part right here. But since it did, cool. Now I just look for what appears to be a good opportunity somewhere to remove damages or damaged place. Sometimes I damage it, sometimes there's internal damage. At this stage I look for internal damage, and there's the only spot that I can tell right there, so maybe I should just go for that one first. And in the process of going for that, if I can remove flakes in other areas first in preparation to remove this, I'll do it. Like right here may be a good opportunity to remove a flake. It's not perfect, but it's expedient, so let's try it. Yeah, didn't work all that great. I'm going to hit it again anyway because it still looks all right. Not bad, not too bad. Now I'm just working on the overall shape. See, I want to get a center line going here. In my mind, I've got a center line going, and the base and the tip need to be the endpoints of the center line. So I just kind of repaired this side, so I knew, or I know now in my mind, where the potential center line is going to be. And there are areas that I need to remove. There's one big one right here. I can go for that one, but there's probably at least 4 more different areas that I could attack, but I'm choosing to do this one. Mainly because this is still the largest area right now of cortex. So I'm going to attack the worst spot. And this seems like a good entry into that worst spot right here. Even though I know I'm going to have to deal with this soon, I still want to remove this. And a very heavy, hard strike, which means I was up a little bit higher than normal, hit harder than normal, stiffer than normal, and platform was pretty good, at a pretty good angle right there for the hit. So everything seemed to support a good flake, and fortunately it did. Yeah, I don't like the way this looks. I'm not going to attack it yet. One of the reasons why I delay sometimes is just so I can get more of a feel for the stone. If I work on other areas, I get more of a feel for it, and then I can say, all right, I think I know how the stone is behaving a little bit better now. This area is going to be very difficult to fix. So with that, just that little bit of extra knowledge of the stone, it'll be a little bit easier probably to remove flakes in this area to fix it. So the more experience I have with this particular material on this particular piece of stone, the better when I start to attack that problem area on the other side. That sounded like it released something. Yeah, okay, I hit it in the wrong spot. Instead of hitting there, this corner hit there. Now, if you guys have been watching a long time, sometimes this goes by really fast and you don't notice that my billet is hitting in the wrong spot. I just go with the flow and continue. Seems like everything's okay. Seems like maybe even that's advantageous. Well, it didn't really matter on this strike. I could have still removed that flake, probably. In fact, it may have even been better because this strike removed some of the mass here, which would have made this a little stronger, which may have caused this to go further. But I don't really think about that in the process of removing these flakes. I don't think in that way. A lot of times it's just hit and see, hit and see. And so I don't repeat myself every time. Not all these strikes are proper. Not all the platforms are proper. Not all the decisions are proper. According to my experience, sometimes I make a decision that is not in line with things that I've learned before, because I take risks. It doesn't matter many times, especially at this stage. It doesn't really matter how it's progressing, as long as I am getting thinner and more biface looking. But at some point, I need to be concerned about how far these flakes are traveling inward as the primary method of reduction. Okay, right now the primary method of reduction is just removing lumps, not thinning per se with special flakes, quote unquote special thinning flakes. These are thinning flakes, but they're not the type that most knappers consider to be thinning flakes. I consider these to be marginal or on the margin thinning flakes, which doesn't make much sense unless you're looking only at the margin, which I do. I look only at the margin sometimes, which means just part of the biface, just the exterior outline of the biface. You look at how it's called margins. You look at the margins and you see where it's thick. And you don't need to send in really long flakes to remove thickness on the margin. Okay. All right. So now I'm at the stage where I feel like there's going to be a transition in mindset. Now I have to be thinking about length of the flakes as one of the major characteristics of the flake. Length is important at this stage. Length of the flake is important at this stage because I can't lose much width. I have to remove thickness primarily. So in order to do that, there's got to be long flakes with little tiny platforms. So this is a much better developed platform here for striking into this area than that was developing in the preliminary stages. And the hit was much harder than many of the previous flakes that were of this size. This is hit much harder. Why? Because I want to ensure its travel. This is past the margin. So I hit extremely hard. Now, it could have traveled much further without any damage to my final plan. All right, so I wasn't afraid to hit it really hard because the potential could have been a flake out to this area, which is just fine. Turned out to be not so big of a flake, but it's still just fine. It still went at least halfway. So I am concerned about the thinness and the length of the flakes at this point. The thinness, not only of the flake, but thinness of the workpiece. I am now looking to see if I'm actually thinning the biface and creating long, thin flakes. Another long, thin flake coming up. This platform is better developed than the ones at the beginning stages. The potential path of the flake is not ideal because of this dip, but I'm going to go for it anyway because of expediency. Again, hard hit, very hard hit to remove as much as I can with the strike, and it went considerably far distance across the face. If I had hit it softer, it would have gone less far. The danger is sometimes in the process of hitting it very hard, if you hit it too high, the flake travels too far and you can get an overshot, which is not something you plan on doing in most cases, especially when you're trying to preserve the width. All right. I am now looking at the ends to see if they are still remaining thin compared to the center. The center is now getting thinner, so I need to proportionately thin the ends again. Namely the tip here in this case, I'd like it to be thinner, and I'm going to do some more thinning here before I tackle the middle. So I'm looking at the tip now, where I can remove flakes to thin it down in a little bit more careful way than just an expedient way, by developing this edge, removing flakes so that this angle seems to be more proper. Now, I say seems to be because you never know about some of these platforms. You may develop them too strongly, in which case you break off the whole tip. You may develop them a little weakly, which means you're not going to get much of a flake. So you just have to kind of go with the flow in a lot of cases, and then learn from what the material's doing, so that the next platform you develop can have a little bit better characteristics for the kind of flakes you want to remove. So that's what I did there. I learned from here there's too much of a bite with a strong area. So on this one, I kind of made it a little weaker, and it traveled a little bit better without the bite. So I don't think the camera has interrupted us. 41 minutes, yep. And no interruptions. Let's see how far I can go. See how many minutes I can nap this without worrying about it. Okay. Now this angle here is not ideal. Platform is not ideal. It's not proper. My strike is going to be okay because there's nothing really interfering with that part. This is the protrusion is good, but the look of the face of the platform is not good because it has irregularities, which is not proper. The convexity is good. The path appears to be good. No defects or major dips. I'm going to try to shoot a flake into here as far as I can. I'm going to strike hard. It wouldn't hurt to beef that up, although beefing it up too much means that I'll take a big bite out of it, maybe. Well, we'll see what happens. So I'm going to be angling in this way to try to remove the flake this way. I don't use my fingers for any type of special pressure or maneuvering back here. I'm just applying support only for steadying the workpiece, not for guiding flakes. I'm using the weight of the workpiece against itself with these kinds of strikes that are quick. Quick strike is resisted by the mass of the biface. A quick strike is. Okay? It's different from a slow strike. A slow strike, the workpiece has time to adjust to the movement, and it moves more because of the time. If you do it quickly, it doesn't have time enough to move in tandem with the striking billet. Okay, here we go. First strike wasn't powerful enough, and I don't think there's any incipient cracks, so it's probably safe to hit it again. That one was powerful enough, but for some reason it did not pull enough of the stone with it to generate a long flake. And it could be just the defects in the platform didn't allow enough of the stone to be pulled off. It cracked too low toward the edge. And I could have anticipated that, but you never know. And I just removed that flake in a kind of a slow motion, expedient way, just to show you slow motion in terms of explanation, not in terms of speed of the strike, because the speed of the strike was fine. Now that one I hit even harder. I was hoping for a longer distance, but that's still okay because I reached halfway. But I'm gonna have to generate some better flakes. Now here I cannot expect to take off this hump from this side. Obviously, I'm gonna have to come in from here or there or from the other side if I want to preserve any of this material in here. I could just whittle this all the way down and then strike it, but no, I want to keep this width because this side looks pretty good here. Keep the width if I can. I think I'll trim a little bit of that off just because I don't want to trim it later. I don't want to be trimming this later on. Why? Because it's a little bit dicey. If you thin out the rest of it and you have a dicey area that you're leaving until last, it may end up breaking your whole piece. But if you try to get rid of it first, you know, the areas around it that you may be hitting hard to get rid of, if you remove those first, you don't have to worry about them later. And in this case, now I don't have to worry about that thick area here. I can look at something else now. I can look at something else to get rid of this. And not because this is removed, but because it just kind of gives me a better feel. It's difficult to put into words because we don't nap with words, we nap with our brains as far as the muscle memory. We don't nap with our vocabulary. A brain doesn't say, doesn't use language to nap. It uses the muscle memory to nap. Trying to translate the muscle memory into words is a little bit I don't know. It's difficult to explain why I remove it in certain areas because I'm not really thinking about why I need to explain it. I'm thinking with each strike a lot of times beforehand, how am I going to explain this strike? If I strike here, how am I going to explain that? What is the explanation behind it? Whereas normal napping, you don't think about why. You just let your muscle memory in tandem with your strategy work together to remove flakes. You don't have that added requirement of trying to explain the reason. I am removing some of these flakes in a way that is conducive to the explanation. I could be removing some of these in ways that would defy explanation. Like, I really don't know why I did it that way. Just did it. It's not really productive to nap that way for someone that needs an explanation. If you need an explanation, I need to be able to nap it in a way that I can explain it. So I'm napping it in a way that I can explain it. Okay. So I took that off because I'm thinning the ends. And I need to thin this end down here. Need to thin this margin. And I also need to thin the base. It was improper strikes leading to some bites and some irregularities in the flake removal, but I don't care. Why I don't care? It's because in the overall scheme of things, I'm going to lose that anyway. I may have lost a little bit too much, but I am going to lose that. Yeah. May have lost a little bit too much, maybe. So the next stage I'm thinking is to remove this lump here before I tackle this lump here. Only because it's just easier. That's the only reason. I could try to develop a platform to remove that now, because I'm eventually going to have to remove it with a platform development somewhere. But I'm thinking maybe the contours will be a little different, and the setup and the whole thing is going to be a little bit different when I come back to this. After I deal with this, it may be a little bit different story. I may be able to come in through here, as an example. You know, if I knock this edge back, trying to take this off, this is going to be closer, so that means I might go this way in with it to get rid of that lump. Now, hopefully the built-in microphone is picking this up. I'm glad there's not much background noise. There's nobody out here. It's late. Not many crickets out. I'm pausing my speech during the abrading just in case. Okay. This angle is pretty good. The pathway of the flake is not that great because I'm worried about it stopping here and creating an island, but if I strike it hard enough, it may overcome those issues. Although it still doesn't look that good, I'm going to hit it anyway. No. Now that I think about it, I'm going to take back the edge a little more, just to get this closer to that. Yeah, and develop this edge a little bit better in terms of strength and lowering it as well, giving me a little bit better chance of striking past halfway. Or so I'm thinking. We'll see. That was the hardest hit of the whole process so far. And I did manage to get that flake to travel, but it did not detach fully. We'll see what happens as I continue. That was the hardest hit of the whole process so far. That was an extremely hard hit, and that's not unusual. Yeah, much harder than a lot of those, well, harder than any of those preliminary flakes at the beginning stages. Hoping that I would get a large flake out of it. It is a large flake, but it's not fully detached. It's incomplete. I'm going to hit here, which is not really a proper platform, but I would have to lose much more of the edge to make it more proper, which I don't want to do. Now, I didn't hit that. I hit over here, and let's see if it actually worked. It did actually work. It probably would have worked there too, but it was a little bit off, but it still had sufficient power to remove a large flake, but it's not completely detached. See that? It still has a little bit of a fingernail there, which means it's still going inward to a slight extent. I need to make sure I get rid of that at this stage because I want no defects is starting to get thin, I am concerned about this kind of thing at this stage. Only because it's getting thin. If it wasn't getting that thin, then I wouldn't be too worried about it. And I would maybe work on some other areas and then come back to it, just like I came back to this one. But in this case, I can't really come back to it. I got to deal with it right away. I'm starting to see that I'm losing more of this edge, so maybe there's a way to attack this from this side, but we'll see. We'll see how this progresses, and I'll be a little flexible. I'll be flexible as to where I attack. I may attack that lump from various places as well. It may take more than one flake. I'm not thinking usually how many flakes this is going to take. I'm thinking only 1 or 2 flakes ahead of time. Now this is where you would normally think I would hit, but I'm probably going to hit up a little higher. If it hits there, it's okay, but I'm going to try to hit up here, which is an improper strike, because in the perfect world, this platform would be the one that's protruding. But in this case, it's not. This one's protruding. But I'm going to try to hit there instead, because it's a little bit above center line. And I think I can reach this mass a little bit better if I hit a little bit higher, even though it's an improper area. Okay, so I hit. You can see where I blew away the area. And it did manage to scoop out the part of that flake that was not detached. It may have done the same thing if I had hit there, but I didn't trust this as much as this one up here. It's partially from experience, but partially because of the travel of the flake. The potential path of the flake seemed more advantageous from here than from here. Seemed that way. It's the feel. And I thought, you know, it's reasonably easy to explain that one as well. Now I still need to remove some cortex. I'm not too concerned about the length, although I'd like to preserve the length. Not too concerned because I got to get rid of some of that cortex there anyway. If I had to have a certain length, of course I'd choose a different stone entirely to meet the requirements. If I had length requirements, I would choose a different stone. But since I have no real length requirements other than to maximize the length, I can say, well, I just needed to remove that just for the sake of producing the biface, you know. So I took a little bit more off of there just to get it more regular. Carefully removing flakes to make it more regular, because it's too much of a rise there. Now with all this commotion and stuff, I found that I could probably send a flake in this way, which coincides to a possibility I was thinking about earlier, but now it's made itself more apparent. I'm intentionally talking a little bit softer on this video. Because it's easier for me to think that way. Think about language, not think about flint knapping, but think about the language that I have to use to explain this. Okay. Now, this is a good platform. This is a good platform. This can be developed to be a good platform. I'm going to go with this one here. Why? because it just intuitively feels a little bit better, because the pathway seems more direct to hit that lump. Very hard hit. I missed my area. I hit further that way than I would like to have hit. So a little bit of change in strategy. And now I have to come down this way or come from this way. Either way is a bummer, because now I have to produce a longer flake in general. I need to remove that mass, so let's try that. I'm inching closer to the obstacle. The closer I get to the obstacle, the better my chances are of removing it. That's too much of the edge and not enough flake. It didn't seem like it would be that way. It seemed like the platform would have been strong enough, but unfortunately, when it seems to be, it not always is. All right. So before that got out of hand, I had to remove a relatively large flake. Now I'm in a situation where my tip is getting thick again, so I have to go back to the tip to thin it down. Thick, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the piece. So I'm just going to thin it down. Not all the strikes are perfect. Not all the platforms are desirable. Not all the techniques for preparing the edges is according to the best way. But I'm still working on the expedient level to a certain extent, because it's still in the preform, or it's still in the biface stage, not quite the preform stage. So thin, the tip is getting thinner. Not every flake removal is the way I envisioned it. The goal is to try to remove the most mass with the least amount of flakes. You know, you don't want to be hitting it too much and taking too long. So that's the procedure I'm working with at the moment. I'm going to switch procedures for attacking this one, because I'm not really thinking about least amount of flakes. I'm thinking mainly about which is the best avenue for a large flake. I may have to remove many other flakes to remove that one large flake. I'm not trying to conserve, even though it seems like I might conserve it by thinking in terms of one large flake. I'm not trying to conserve as far as number of flakes. Here on the tip, yes, but that, no. I may have to remove many other smaller flakes, take a long time to develop this edge, to finally see a clear path to remove this obstacle. I may just linger here for a long time trying to figure it out, and I might just give up and say I'm not going to linger anymore. Just go for it. If I break it, oh well. If I can't see a clear path, if I can't see a good opportunity, I'll just take the less of the many evils the least of the many evils that I see, and try for a flake in that spot. I may even come over here and try to develop some of this edge. Maybe I can shoot a flake inward without having to mess up this edge. Yeah. It's a long shot, risky. If I come from this edge, there's a chance of ruining the whole piece with an overshot. But it may be the clearest most obvious path for a flake, because it just looks better. You know, there's a step fracture here, so that doesn't look good from this side. There's a defect, I don't know how deep it goes on this side. This is a little bit too far down, believe it or not. I'd rather have a continuous edge here to strike into instead of having that downward delta, believe it or not. This is good for indirect percussion, but a direct percussion blow a lot of times crushes such a pointy, small platform. An indirect percussion blow can sit on that platform and remove a large flake. Now let me see. I'm going to hit it with direct percussion anyway. I'm thinking that this mass may be too great. It may just stop and I'll have to come in and risk an overshot later. No, still, I think it's still too delicate. Just a little bit closer to the obstacle and I might be able to get it. All right. I think I did some damage to it. Hard, fast strike. Now that one, this step fracture is easily, relatively speaking, removed from the other side. I still have this little obstacle. What I learned from here is that the edge is still a little too delicate. One, because it looks like it bit a little bit. There's two reasons for a bite. One is it's ground down too much and it removes a lot because it's really strong. But another reason is sometimes the whole thing is just kind of weak. I'm thinking maybe that's because the whole thing was weak. I may be wrong. I may have grounded too much. But whatever the case is, I think just making it a little bit beefier couldn't hurt. We'll see. So I hit directly into it. Fast strike. And I think I did manage to remove the mass that I wanted. All right. Now I have this platform here. Seems like a pretty straightforward strike into that mass. Potential for a long flake is there. Long flakes require me to make sure the platform is at a good angle. Below center line. Convex all the way. And with hard, fast strike. Oops, missed it. Hard, fast strike, just barely clipping the edge there. And let's see what happened. No support here as far as the flake. This is just holding the workpiece. I did not pull or manipulate this side in any way. I just let it go. All right. Hard and fast strike, but barely clipping the edge so that I only catch that part of the platform. Okay. So yeah, I'm concerned about generating this kind of flake at this stage for the remainder of the piece. I will set up my strategy for this kind of flake for the remainder of the piece, set up edges using the same strategy in other areas. Just kind of creeping up, eventually getting to it. Eventually getting to into a position where I can run the kinds of flakes that I need. All right. Now this seems like a good platform, easy, low-hanging fruit. We'll see. Yeah. So this series of flakes is they're all very similar in concept. Now I just have to continue thinning. You know, all these flakes removed substantial mass from this half. Okay? Now I've got a substantial amount of mass on this half, so my next strategy is to remove that mass. The middle, it's not too bad. It's these areas here. This is an ideal situation because if you can, you know, attempt to do these longer flakes to take out the middle, if you can, so that the remaining mass is just near the edge. Did I plan on it to work that way? No. It just so happened to scoop that out, which is advantageous, which makes it easier for the rest of the flakes, if I don't mess them up. Yeah, oh yes, even though I'm getting used to the stone, I can still mess it up. Now one question is, where do I stop? Where does it become a preform? When is it proper to stop using the direct percussion to satisfy the question? Question is, how do I reduce this only with direct percussion into a preform stage? Where do I stop? As soon as it starts looking like a preform, I can stop. Some people would consider that a preform because you work the bass first and then thin out the blade later. I can thin out the bass first, put a stem in it, and then do the blade later. I can develop it that way, and in that case, it's already a preform. You know what I mean? It's already a preform. But in some cases, if I'm making a blade with no stem, it's a little bit harder to know when the preform stage is, because it can be a preform all the way up until the sharpening. And the sharpening is when it becomes the knife blade. Usually I stop when it's 4:1. Width to thickness ratio, right? Is that what I usually go by? 4:1 or 5:1? Maybe sometimes 3:1. We'll do this in millimeters. 70 millimeter by, let's say, 15. The average would be about 12. See, let's say if it was 12 into 72, what is that, 6:1? It's almost 6:1. Probably 5:1. That's good enough for a preform in my view, but maybe not in some other people's view. So I will continue. If you want to know, a lot of guys can get it down to 10:1 just by doing direct percussion. Can I do 10 to 1? No, I think my best, unless I'm lucky, my best is about 8 to 1. With exclusively direct percussion. If I don't want to push it, I can do an 8 to 1 or 9 to 1 with direct percussion, but that's pushing it. I mean, that's every strike is, well, it's either breaks or I do it. Either breaks or I do it. Either breaks or I do it. Where's my support? My support is primarily where I'm hitting. I'm not bridging it, like supporting it on the ends like that. I'm supporting it right where it needs support, which is right where I'm hitting it, which makes it look like I'm using my finger to manipulate the path of the flake, but I'm not. Just supporting the workpiece, that's all I'm doing. The weight of the workpiece is being used against itself. I'm not doing any fancy pulling or supporting back here. Okay? There's nothing fancy going on behind the scenes. Sometimes I interfere with the flake travel on smaller pieces. My fingers actually end up accidentally applying enough pressure to stop these flakes, and it may be the case in that particular flake as well. I may have stopped it, but I really don't know. It doesn't feel like I was stopping it, but you never know. I may have contributed to it not traveling very far. But I can live with it because I'm already at, let's say, 5 to 1 with the thickness ratio. This doesn't matter. At any time I can stop and go to indirect percussion because I already consider this to be a preform. Not that I wait until it's a preform to do indirect percussion. I can do it before then. But I prefer to finish these out from preform to final stage with indirect percussion. I prefer indirect percussion to finish out. Now that's a problem because I don't have an ability to push on it with a pressure flaker because I'm not using pressure right now. The requirements are only direct percussion. So that's what I would do with only direct percussion. Slam the flaker into the face of that step fracture and hope for the best. Is it a good strategy? No. But the requirements are do this only with direct percussion. Now some of you will catch on and say, you know what? Doing it only with direct percussion doesn't seem like a very good procedure. You're right. But it can be done. Some people want to see that it can be done. All right, that's fine. Is it a good strategy? Not necessarily. Is there a reason why people would want to do that way? I don't know. Some people just want to be stubborn, I suppose, but some people like direct percussion and they enjoy flintknapping more if they do more of the direct percussion type of napping. They enjoy it more if they do the type of napping that they enjoy more. I guess it's pretty obvious. Makes you kind of wonder though, if they're not getting good results with direct percussion, why they're enjoying it. I don't know. So there must be a different explanation why they would insist on going as far as they possibly can with direct percussion. Well, maybe that's not the consideration. Maybe it's just the fact that they don't get it. They just want to know how it's done because they have the frustration of not being able to understand it. It's just frustrating not to understand it. So I hit the front of that step fracture, remember? And it left an incipient crack, and that's what that is. So it's a remnant of the incipient crack. It doesn't really matter that much because I got to thin that down anyway. All right, so at this stage, I'm removing way too much of the edge to justify me continuing with direct percussion. See how much of the edge I'm removing? Every time I strike, it's getting proportionately more and more narrow with each strike. The flake removal to width removal ratio is not that great right now. Yes, I can remove big flakes, but they're taking a toll on the edge. With indirect percussion, you won't take as much of a toll on the edge. All right, so I've gone through the explanation for an hour and a half, and the camera seems no worse for the wear. That's exciting. But it's getting a little late for me. I am very tired. I will measure the width to thickness ratio. Let's say I'm at 65 millimeter, and the greatest width, let's just go with 12 again. 12 into 60 is 5, so it's a little bit better than 5 to 1. Yeah, a little bit better than 5 to 1. I consider that a preform for a knife blade at 5 to 1. Yes, I can go smaller. I mean, yes, I can go thinner, but with this big chunky thing, it'd be difficult. I would need to have a different diameter. Maybe this diameter. No. Maybe this diameter aluminum. This is 1.5 inches. This is probably 1 inch. Let's see. I don't have to guess. I got it. I got it. This is a little bit over 1 inch, 1.8 inches. If I had 1.8 inches as a billet, I might be able to go thinner, yeah, with aluminum. But I don't have this size. I try to keep my tools to a minimum. I can easily take over with indirect percussion from here. Right? So I would consider this high grade raw after the fact because it didn't snap easily in half. I was a little bit too aggressive in the beginning. Yeah, so it's high grade, on the high grade side. I have another piece that I will do on a different video. I think I am going to make a video tomorrow on Thanksgiving, again late at night. I'm going to tackle this one next time. I'll upload this video, see how everything goes. Hopefully the new camera and the new phone, you know, they're the same thing. The camera's in my phone. If it works well, I'll be very happy. Okay, that's it for tonight.